Welcome to Doc's Clubhouse. This is Eric Lenaburg, the doctor of baseball, and we're here for a preseason preview show. Opening day is tomorrow, and my guest tonight is Jim Campanis Jr. Jim, welcome again.
Thank you, Eric. Great to be here.
Thanks. You've been with me before a few times, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. Right off the bat, we were watching a game last night, the Dodgers and Angels, and what a series of events that took place there last night.
It was kind of shitty, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, to put it mildly. I read today that they're going to have the stadium ready for opening day, but just in case the Angels offered Anaheim Stadium, to have been there last night. It was a spring training game. I don't know why they dragged it out so long. It seemed like about 45 minutes before they decided to cut the game, but Dodger Stadium of all places.
Well, and I like what the Angels said on Twitter. They said, "Smell you later, Dodgers." There's so many jokes to this one, but I mean, let's think about the stadium. I mean, my grandpa, moved out to Los Angeles from Brooklyn, and the stadium was being built in 1958, and it took him till 62 to get him to play in it.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that pipe was there in 1958. So we got to remember, even pipes have their own lifespan, and certainly that is something one of our friends on Facebook, Terrence Morgan, talked about. They could have actually retrofitted the sewer system when they redid the front, the new seats up front.
Yes.
But clearly they didn't. So now they're going to have to pay for their...
Obviously. And it had to happen during a game. It couldn't have happened last week during the day when nobody was there. And they could
Of
fix
course.
It. Yeah.
Of course.
So let's talk about the Dodgers for a minute and all of the National League teams. Let's start with the National League. Dodgers look good. Justin Turner being injured hasn't caused him to miss a beat, apparently. Kike Hernandez will be playing every day, and I know you, as I believe, he should be playing every day.
Right.
They're keeping Jock Peterson. That was a very controversial move to all the Dodger fans. They sent Andrew Tolles out to the minors today. So basically the same team they had last year. There's no real big additions, other than Turner will be out for about 4 weeks. How do you see the National League West shaping up?
Well, I think the West is going to be, a 1 or 2 horse race.
Right.
It almost seems like the parity that the commissioner was trying to get, and I think baseball had a few years ago, is kind of gone.
Yeah.
Because the teams with the money are paying the tax that they got to pay. I know this year the Dodgers and Yankees were very, looking at what they did really in the offseason, they kept under the number.
Right.
So they wouldn't get a 50% tax after this year. And then guess what? Next year, they're going to go back and start spending again. I think that was also part of the drought from these free agents not being signed.
Right.
It was because of this lack of spending by the big teams. And we can almost look at those teams and say, Boston's going to be in it. The Yankees are going to be in it. The Cubs are going to be in it. The Nationals are going to be in it. The Dodgers are going to be in it. And I think the Angels actually stepped up. I was pretty impressed with the maneuvers that they made, considering they have a pretty healthy, salary with Pujols, who's
right.
coming up on the end of his career, a Hall of Famer. We talked about this last night while we were watching the game. I think he's worth every penny because of the fact that he's mentoring Mike Trout. And I don't think Mike Trout, maybe he would be, but I don't think Mike Trout would be Mike Trout if
right.
it wasn't for Pujols being his teammate. And they sit together during the game. Their lockers are next to each other. They're close and friends.
Right.
Even though they're maybe 10 years apart in age. And I just think that's what, if you're going to pay a guy that kind of money, you need a guy who has the character to rebuild or to build up, these rookie guys that are coming up. A guy like Trout, who was 22 when he got in the big leagues or something?
19, actually.
19, yeah. So.
And, that's something a lot of fans don't realize, that Pujols is playing that role and doing what is a valuable service for the team. So a lot of people criticize the Angels for keeping him and playing him, but really, he's still producing 100 RBIs every year, and that alone, the mentoring of Trout, makes it worthwhile.
And Utley's, doing the similar thing for the Dodgers.
That's right.
He didn't get sent. I mean, the Dodgers went and signed him because they knew, hey, Mr. Silver Fox, you're getting gray, you're getting up there in age.
Right.
But your work ethic, and last night he went out and he got a hit.
That's right.
And so. I look at him as another example of Torrey Hunter was like that at the end of his career.
Yes.
I mean, he was on everywhere he went toward the end of his career, he won.
Yeah.
Now, was that an accident? I mean, I really don't think so. I
don't think so either.
There's a chemistry that some guys bring to the table. I think Nick Swisher was one of those guys who's now announcing, and it just seems like certain guys kind of are a good match for They bring their knowledge from their experience,
Right.
but they're also really good people.
Right.
And they share their knowledge, and they help someone who might even be playing in front of them
Yes.
because they've had their time. And I again, there's a lot of jerks out there.
Yeah.
I played with them. You played with them.
Right.
There's a lot of nice guys out there too, and I'd like to see how some of these guys are being rewarded with these extra years in their old age in baseball, old
Right.
age, 30s, but in their old age, they're being rewarded with extra years because of their mentorship.
Right. And you mentioned Torrey Hunter and Hunter Pujols, Utley. These are guys who not only solid players, good careers, good people, but winning is habit forming with them. So when they go wherever they go, whatever team they go to, they expect everyone to win. They expect all the other guys to be invested as they are.
Absolutely.
And it makes a difference. I know it did when I played. I know it did when you played.
Right. And I had the benefit of, it's funny, I told you this story, but Bob Boone was my big mentor, and I happened to play with Bob's son, Brett, in college. And I was just being converted to a catcher. I really didn't know a lot. Even though my dad was a major league catcher, he would be the first to admit he didn't know what the hell he was doing behind the plate. He was a good hitter.
Yeah.
But catching was a whole nother story. And anyway, had a number of lucky circumstances to be around Bob, who really told and showed me what he did.
Right.
And fast forward, like 8 years or so, and or 6 years or so, and now Bob and I are on the Mariners trying to make the catching one of
Both
the spots.
of you.
Yeah. And here I am, like now I'm my idol is sitting next to me in the bullpen, you know, and I'm like, Bob, I'll catch this pen, man. You relax, I'll get it, But it was great, and he was very gracious to me even at that point where, he knew I was trying to get the job that he wanted.
Right.
Neither of us got it, okay, but it was wonderful being able to kind of play with my idol.
Right.
It was cool.
And I'm sure with his experience in the majors, I'm sure he brought that same attitude of winning. You win wherever you go.
And it was more of a lead by example. He's not a vocal guy. Neither is Chase Utley.
Right.
And I just watched what he did, and I watched how he did it, and how professional he was, and how classy he was, and how gracious he was. And he treated the clubby like he treated the GM. I mean, the same way, both with class and respect. And that's the kind of thing I think his other son Aaron displays a similar quality.
Right.
And I think that's what helped him get the job for the Yankees.
Right. And going back to Torrey Hunter for a second, you mentioned what a nice guy he is. Nicest guy in the world. I lost an announcing job to him with a major league team, but I couldn't be mad at the guy because I liked him.
Yeah.
Go back to Aaron Boone for a second as we're talking about teams that are going to be contending and possibly winning this year. He has inherited a Yankee team that was strong to begin with, but what is he going to bring to the table to improve them even more?
So I've had these conversations with some of my friends, and back in the day, the manager was the sole unit, and everything spun off of him. He was like the sun. Okay, well now he's almost like the moon. He almost just kind of just circles, and he just makes sure everything the seasons are right, and he just kind of handles the press. Right. He deals with the sabermetrics guys upstairs, and when they say so and so is batting 200 against this guy, and the other guy is batting 300, so you got to play him tonight.
Right.
That's one of the things. I don't know if everyone knows that, but the manager really doesn't write the lineup by himself like he used to.
Not
I have a hunch that this guy's going to have. There's no such thing as hunches.
Right.
It comes back to the numbers. So Aaron understands that, being the announcer that he was for many years. Right. He was very much involved in how that whole Sabre thing works.
Right.
He talked about it when he was an announcer on the show, how it was a good pick to put this guy in there against this pitcher. It's a good matchup, as they like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the things that Girardi was pushing back a lot at. I think that's one of the reasons they didn't re-sign him. When they went to look for the next guy, I think they were looking for a guy who was kind of young and could be around for a while,
Right.
Good with the press, understood sabermetrics, and guys like him on the team.
Well, that's a critical point, too. He has to be liked by the players. Has to be. Didn't used to be that way.
No, nowadays you have to.
Right.
And again, it goes back to that's really their job, is to sort of massage the team chemistry.
Right.
Versus in the past, it was like almost a dictatorship, and you play my way or you're not going to play.
Right. Right. So. It's a very different world now in the game. So I think the Dodger-Yankee World Series is possible this year.
I mean, and by the way, I grew up, with the Dodgers.
Right.
And my grandpa's a GM and such, and so I was bat boy in '77. I was the kid on the left field line playing catch with the left fielder,
Right.
And in the '78 World Series, I was also there, and in the '81 World Series, I was also there. And those three, Yankee Dodger World Series, I don't know what the ratings are like in comparison, but those were huge, because you're talking about the two biggest cities in the country,
Right. Two biggest markets.
But it's funny because you can follow a Dodger game or a Yankee game in St. Louis, for example,
right.
and there'll be like half the crowd's a Yankee fan or a Dodger fan. The Dodgers and the Yankees travel so well, and fans who never even been to New York love the Yankees,
Right.
and so the history obviously and the legacy of both of those teams precedes themselves, and so they, at the end of the day, you think about Ruth and Sandy Koufax and Lou Gehrig and and you just go down the list of all these legends from
Right.
both teams, and that's one of the sort of like a part of nostalgia, that now, of course, I was telling you off air that there's a lot of people talking about the Washington Nationals.
Yes.
Well, they got how many? Like 6 years there, or something like that. 10
Something like
years
that.
maybe.
Feels like that. Yeah.
And there's great players in that team without a doubt, but at the same time, like, you're not going to see the same fan base that you will see
Right.
outside of Washington, because of the fact that they're relatively new,
Right.
as an organization that moved from Montreal. And then, like the Cubs are another team that has a huge fan base. Although they've never won, until recently,
Right.
they've been that sort of. So anyway, I kind of have heard a lot about maybe the Astros being back there,
Right.
and also in Washington, I've heard a lot of people speculating that they could get there because of their pitching
This year, yeah.
and a couple of good hitters, Harper and a couple other guys,
Yeah.
and it'll be interesting to see. But that's why they play the season. That's
That's
what's
right.
kind of cool about it. They played the season to kind of figure out, well, who's going to be there.
That's right. It's funny you bring that up. I interviewed Buck Showalter. I think it was the 2014 season. And I was talking to him, and I brought up all the numbers that said this team was going to do this. The Orioles were going to finish in third or fourth place. And he finally said, well, why did we bother playing the season then? Let's just go with those numbers and go right to the World Series.
Right.
And he had me,
Right.
That
And
was
I
a good
think that's
point.
the fun part is, there's always a surprise,
Right.
and to me, I think the Astros were a surprise to a lot of people because, what was it, 2 years earlier, they had predicted they were going to win the World
Yeah.
Series in 2017 because they were so terrible at the time.
That's
that
right.
was a shocking cover of Sports Illustrated,
Right.
right? And they did it,
They did it.
And so to me last year, although I think if you're a Dodger fan, you obviously didn't like the end result.
Right.
But to me, as a baseball fan in general, to see a young team like the Astros come out of really nowhere,
Right.
guys that we've never really heard about.
Bunch of homegrown players.
Yeah, and you don't get to see too much because it's not a
Right.
very big market. But to see them and what they did and how they did it,
Right.
and now their confidence is just through the roof. So I kind of feel like they're the team to beat in the American League for
It's
sure.
a good point. However, it's hard to repeat. It's very hard to repeat. How often do we see that anymore?
No, you're right. But at the same time, I think this team's so young that and hungry
Right.
that I think they have a really good chance. And they're so deep. And when I'm talking deep, we're talking deep in pitching.
Right.
And their hitters are very consistent. And if you wanted to teach a kid how to swing, well, just pretty much let's watch an Astros game.
Yeah.
And let's copy those guys.
Who is the hitting coach for the Astros?
Well, my first manager was actually their hitting coach in 2016, Ralph Dickinson, formerly known as Ralph Dick. And he was my favorite Dick,
Yes.
around that I've ever. He's by the way, his mom was a Dick, his dad was a Dick, his kids were Dicks.
The whole family.
The whole family were Dicks, but now they changed their name to Dickinson. But anyway, he ended up being reassigned to run all of the minor league.
Right.
He's more of a development coach.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know who the hitting coach is, quite honest. I don't know. But whoever it is, they're doing a good job.
They're doing a great job. Young players. Another reason that falls in favor of them possibly repeating, they don't have some veteran free agents who've been around and are looking at their last year and are looking to move on. And they don't have the egos there. They don't seem to have the egos in Houston.
Well,
that some other teams have.
No, but I think like McCann, the catcher,
Yeah.
is a perfect guy, a leader at the catcher role, and someone who can mentor just by watch how I play the game,
Right.
and you guys do it like this. I've had tremendous success. And you guys will have tremendous success if you follow this path.
Right.
And this leads to off the field stuff. This leads to how you dress. This leads to how you eat. This leads to what you're doing after the game.
Right.
And all of those things play into what happens on the field. in the heat of competition over a 162 game season.
Right.
It's very important. And then I also think they have character within the team, like a chemistry that lends itself to sacking up, to doing it, to making it happen, to getting that key hit, to getting that key strikeout.
Right.
And to me, like that's what winning teams often have. You and I talked about last night how when my grandpa was GM, he liked to keep guys on the team like Vic Davalillo and Manny Moda.
That's right.
And some older guys that were, maybe a little bit past their prime.
Right.
But what they brought to the clubhouse, this chemistry, a lot of times back in those days, it was more like those were the guys kicking the young guys' asses, saying, "Look, I'm 10 years older than you, but I'm still working hard to to be successful. And look at you, you're going out and partying all night." Like they almost self-police,
Right.
So I always look for chemistry. You can have 10 random guys on a team that hate each other,
Right.
and that hate becomes the chemistry. You can have 10 guys who love each other, and that becomes the chemistry.
Right.
And it's a very odd way and how it works. And I've actually read like sports psychology things that talk about certain teams where like everybody hated each other,
Right.
Whether it was football, basketball, baseball, regardless. They were awesome. They worked as a team. They might have hugged each other and smiled after the win,
Right.
and then they went back to hating each other.
Right.
It-
Oakland A's in the 70s.
yeah,
Perfect
but
example.
it worked.
Right.
Somehow it worked. So it's always interesting, sort of how that thing, kind of happens, and I just kind of, that's why I love opening day is all these expectations. Everyone, they even ranked the Oakland A's, who I didn't even think were on the planet. I saw a ranking where they said they're the 10th best team in baseball.
Wow.
So a 10th best team can still end up being a wild card team, can still end up being in the World Series, can
That's
still
right.
end up winning it.
That's right.
That's what's exciting about opening day.
That's right, and opening day is upon us. We're going to take a break right now. Listeners, we will be right back. Hi, everyone, and thanks again for listening to Doc's Clubhouse on the Baseball Network radio station. A reminder for all you listeners, we have Stump the Doc trivia contest every show. So in order to send in your question, you want to email that to docsclubhouse@gmail.com. docsclubhouse@gmail.com. Send in your question. I'll read it on the air, and whoever's with me will know that I'm not Googling to find the answer. If you win, if you stump the doctor, you'll be winning several prizes that are going to be available this season, including 2 tickets to your hometown team. So be sure and listen and enter. Send your questions. And I thank you again for listening. We'll be back momentarily. Okay, we are back. Eric Lenaburg, this is Doc's Clubhouse. Jim Campanis Jr. joining me tonight, doing a little season preview and talking some baseball. Jim, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
And one of our listeners, all the listeners, as you guys know, we have a trivia contest called Stump the Doctor. And our listener, Chuck Boyer, hit me with a question recently. What pitcher shut the Dodgers out 5 times in one season? Now, this was during the late 1960s. And I happen to know this, Chuck. I was at one of those games, so I remember it was Larry Jaster from the St. Louis Cardinals. So great question, though. And Chuck, fire away. Go ahead and email us with more questions. And all you listeners, do the same. And Jim can attest. I'm not sitting here Googling or anything. I just wing it. If I don't know the answer, you get a prize. And Chuck actually had many prizes from our trivia contest on the fast pitch. Anyway, back to what we were talking about, Jim. And before I go further, Dave Hudgens is the hitting coach for the Houston Astros. And I should have known that because Dave was at Arizona State when I was there. Yeah. But getting into this season, some of the teams we'll just touch on briefly. You mentioned Washington has a chance. They've been in the playoffs for like 5 years in a row now and not gotten to the show, the big show. And why are they different this year? What possibly can put them over the top this year?
I'm curious why some of the experts are picking them. Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to those Scherzer and Strasburg, the pitchers.
Right.
You need basically 3 studs, and I think they have a lefty. What's his name?
Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Gio Gonzalez.
Yeah. So they have a pretty good, strong 3-pitcher base,
right, which
will really help you in those in the postseason, as well as a good bullpen, and they play good defense. And they have, one of the elite players in the game in Harper.
Right, and Bryce Harper's playing. It'll be his free agent season.
And so why do guys always go off on that year before they're going to get the payday? It's just amazing how that happens.
Yes.
So I kind of predict, barring injury, that he'll have probably his best year.
Right.
And rumor has it he could get up to $400 million.
Yeah, we've been hearing that for a while. Now, here's a guy, another young player like Trout. 6th year in the major leagues. He's 25 years old.
Right.
And accomplished all he's accomplished so far.
You know his story, right? The high school story?
Yeah, he got his GED.
Yeah, as a sophomore. And when he was a junior in junior college, he was the junior college player of the year. And he got drafted, and when he would have been a senior in high school, he was in rookie ball.
Right.
You know?
At 17 or 18.
Yeah, and then he was in the big leagues at 19.
Yeah.
You know, he had just run through it. And so very unique talent. It's funny, he played with Chris Bryant, you know, in Vegas. They were teammates.
That's right. It's College of Southern Nevada.
Two opposite personalities, you know.
Yeah.
But they've maintained their friendship, and so a lot of people think that Harper may be angling for a Cubs gig so he can get back with his Vegas buddy.
Interesting.
You know.
Personality-wise, you know, he's a lot different than Trout, and they will forever be linked throughout their careers.
Correct.
Because they came up together. They played in the outfield together in the Arizona Fall League in 2012. Trout is a very different personality. Harper can be abrasive. You know, he'll say things that rub people the wrong way, and so there's a lot of people out there, and I hear from them who are pulling for him not to succeed. Which I don't like that, but
right.
You know, they are fans,
but I think that's kind of what's cool about baseball is, you know, Mike Trout. He doesn't even have a nickname. He's just Mike.
Right.
You know, and you know, so he's probably my favorite player, and I'm always more of a fan of right-handed hitters just because I was a right-handed hitter,
right.
and I know how hard it is to hit a right-handed pitcher, and I kind of sometimes scoff. No offense to you, Eric, but I like you lefties got it easy, man. You know,
is that right?
Against some of these pitchers, you know. But I see Harper personality very much, you know, high energy,
right.
maybe even an occasional tantrum kind of guy.
Yes.
And all I see is Trout is smiling, even when he gets out. He broke his thumb when he smiled. You know what I mean? He's just a good and all. You know, I have a couple of friends that work in the Angels organization, right. And he is just a down to earth, really cool, humble. All he cares about is playing baseball.
Right.
They call him kid because he's playing like he's 8, you know, right. Just because he loves the game. And despite all the pressure that's on him and all of this, he doesn't feel it because he's just having such a good time, and he just lets his talent flow. And that's the secret.
Yeah.
A lot of guys get what we used to call the tight ass, you know,
yeah.
And some coaches would be like, you know, put a coal in your ass and it'll come out a diamond, you know, and because some players are just so tight,
right.
You know, and we would call them 5 o'clock players because they could hit great in batting practice at 5 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock when the game started, it wasn't even the same guy.
Right.
But I see Trout, his work ethic, his ability to maintain his composure,
mm-hmm.
And I see him doing that better, I think, than Harper, who,
yes.
you know, I don't ever seen Trout charge the mound. Harper's done it a couple times, you know. Anyway, that's just, but at the same time, like every player has their own style,
right?
You know, so it's great watching them. I love watching these young guys play. Major League Baseball has so many good players under 25. I don't remember ever there being that many of the top players in the game.
I
so
don't
young.
either. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It? Wow. And with Trout, the people I know that work for the Angels tell me that with him, what you see is what you get.
Right.
He is exactly what he looks like. What any other teams that pop out as possible World Series contenders?
I saw someone today pick the Giants, and I just don't see it. I mean, you know, I didn't see that, though, in those 3 years that they won it every other year either.
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes there's this wild card team that comes out of nowhere. A lot of people are thinking that, you know, like we were talking about Oakland earlier.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of nobodies who could be the next Astros,
right.
You know. I think there's also a lot of people talking about St. Louis could be kind of a dark horse in this thing.
They're one of those teams that always seems to compete, and they've come off a couple of bad seasons. So
right.
I know a lot of people are expecting them to rebound.
Right, and then the Brewers, you know, who get very little press because they're in Milwaukee.
Right.
I think that's the smallest major league city.
It is.
And, you know, even though their fan base is very loyal, you know, you and I from L.A. or Arizona, like, we just don't see Brewer games unless they're playing our hometown teams.
That's right.
You know, so there's a lot of talk about their pitching staff being
mm-hmm.
very deep, and a lot of young hitters, including a couple of older guys that came over from overseas that are really making a big difference. So the Brewers might have something, a little couple tricks up their sleeve, and they're going to have to play the Cubs and the Cardinals a lot. So I think that, you know, in some years you forget about the Midwest teams,
right.
And how often they were going to play against each other, like the West Coast teams doing the East Coast teams. But a lot of times the West Coast teams are beating up on some subpar teams,
Right.
and they're bolstering up their stats and their wins and loss records. Well, these guys there's three really strong teams within an hour flight from each other.
Right.
You know, so it's gonna be interesting to see how I think the Central divisions play out this year. On both the Indians, I think, are another team that's going to fight for their. And a lot of people are predicting that it's going to be the Indians and the Astros in the American League playoffs.
Right.
You know, so this is what I love about it. The teams, I think, we talked about this in the beginning. The parity is really not there. There's some teams that are just like almost they're out of it, like the two teams in Florida. You know,
and the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, and the Padres, right, and so. Maybe Seattle can pull in a little something. Maybe the Braves can get a little something going. You know, there's a couple teams that are on the fringe.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I still think that those same like 6 or 7 power teams are going to be fighting for the World Series.
One note on the Brewers: they missed out the wild card, I think, by 1 or 2 games last year.
And you're wearing a Brewers shirt, by the way.
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, give a shout out to the Brewers. I used to work for the Brewers for a couple of years.
Nice.
But they added a couple players too, Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain. They went out and got those guys, and they're paying them the money. So if they're going to do it, this is the year they need to do it.
Yeah, and I think they're stacked up to where, assuming injuries are always a big part.
Right.
But if they can get through a healthy season with some of their stars, there's a really good chance that they're going to end up at least in a wild card situation, if not winning it. Again, the Cubs are strong this year. The Cardinals are looking pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting division to watch. You'll see.
That's a tough division. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about something else now. The statistics for the last couple of years that have garnered a lot of attention, specifically home runs. And we saw, in fact, in the World Series, we saw a lot of home runs hit. We saw Yasiel Puig hit a one-armed home run. And people last year were talking about, well, they've done something to the baseball. They've juiced up the baseball. That's not necessarily the case, is it?
Well, no, and I, you and I were talking off air about the bats, and so when you and I played, we used ash wood, the wood from ash trees, okay, and that's all fine and dandy. The problem is that ash trees are soft. The wood is soft,
right?
And I remember, getting a brand new bat, taking it up to my first at bat, hitting it right on the barrel. And I used to go back and look at my bat after I came off the bases or whatever.
Did the same thing, yeah.
And I'd look for the mark. Where'd I hit it? And there'd be a lace mark, like indented in the bat.
That's right.
Now, these maple bats that they're using now, you can crush one right on the barrel. It jumps off of your bat, okay? It flexes just enough. These cold maple bats, they flex just a hair, whereas the ash bats flexed a lot.
Right.
You can get jammed and bleed one in because the bats are stronger, but they're flexible. They're a little more flexible. The cold maple bats are.
Right.
Now, we talked about this too. In a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, these bats were exploding because they were warm maple bats, which are very rigid. So you can even hit one right on the screws, perfectly on the barrel. And the wood just couldn't withstand that energy, and it would break in half, and the barrel would go flying at the pitcher.
Yeah, broken bats every day. Yeah,
right. So they've fixed that, or understood like why that was happening. So these, like, I personally endorse Chandler Bats. I've talked to David Chandler, the owner of Chandler Bats, and he's told me a whole bunch of really great information about what he does to get these bats. So this is Bryce Harper's favorite bat. This is Aaron Judge's favorite bat, and I've hit with these bats. I had one of them. I have like 2 of them that I use in my baseball, training.
Right.
And if I told you that this bat has hit 5,000 baseballs, you would not believe me. But because you look at it and like it's brand new.
Right.
And there's so to me, I just really firmly believe that the maple bats mixed with the baseballs with the low seams, they've really made the seams a lot lower. Well, when you lower the seams, you create better aerodynamics.
Right.
So the pitchers, maybe that's why they're throwing a little bit harder, but with the bigger seams, they move better. So, and you and I both know as hitters, I'd rather hit a 95-mile-an-hour straight pitch than a 92-mile-an-hour pitch that's diving down
every day of the week. Yeah.
So there's also this thing about the bat path, and there's a trajectory that the pitcher from the mound throws, because the mound is 17 inches high.
Right.
So the pitcher's naturally he's higher than the batter, and he's taught to throw downhill. So the trajectory of the ball has a downward angle.
Right.
And going all the way back to Ted Williams, the art of science, or the science of hitting.
Right.
he recognized that you need to get your bat on the same trajectory as the path, the pitch that's
right.
coming in.
He recommended an upswing.
But he used the word to swing up, and
Yes.
that freaked people out back in the '60s. Freaked them out because everyone was like trying to hit ground balls. And well, nowadays the players are so big and strong, they realize that if they can get their bat on that same trajectory with a short inside the ball to long approach and giving themselves a large margin of error in order to be late, right on time, or ahead of the ball, they're going to barrel it up.
Right.
And when you barrel it up, that's all you can do as a hitter. We used to say we're producers, not directors. So you hit it anywhere hard. It doesn't matter. Right field line, left field line, dead center. But, like last night before the game got called, the Dodger game, there were a couple home runs hit to like left center, right center, and it was like a perfect swing with a perfect bat path, and the ball just carries like another 30 feet. So a fly ball that was hit with sort of an around the ball approach, like in the 60s and the 70s used to teach, they caught that ball.
Right.
You get inside of it and you create good backspin with the maple bat, and you get another 30 feet in carry.
That's right. We saw that with Matt Kemp last night.
And guess what? They moved the fences in on almost every stadium.
Yeah.
They want home runs. So people forget that too. All these new stadiums that have been built, the old ones were torn down with 440 to dead center.
That's right.
And they put up a 400 to dead center.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so that's the other. I think there's three components, and we all know that home runs are a very exciting thing. It's one of the most exciting things in sports, I think. Especially Vladdy Jr. last night hit a walk-off in a spring training game.
That was fantastic.
And he has the perfect swing that you would teach a home run hitter, and he's strong as an ox like his dad, and he's 19, and so again another exciting young player with a perfect bat path, with a really rock-hard flexible maple bat. That's a pretty good combination.
Yeah, watching that clip, wasn't that like watching his dad 25 years ago?
I actually saw on Facebook there was they put them side by side. And so was Vladdy hitting a home run with an Angels uniform on, and Vlad Jr. with the Blue Jays uniform on, and it was like it was eerie, like how exact similar it was with those swings. But I saw a video of Vlad Jr. at 15 before he got signed, hitting in Dominican, and he hit like 15 out in a row at this big stadium.
And he was still a skinny kid back then.
Yeah. So I mean, we're seeing a lot of, you look through the minors, and there's a lot of good players. We talked about Tolles getting called, not making the team.
Right.
That guy's on most other teams. He's a starter.
That's right.
On most other teams, and the Dodgers are so deep. But it's exciting to see that these young players are not just making an impact now, but they're going to be making an impact for years to come.
That's right. That's right. Now, let's talk about pitching today. Now, I've read Justin Verlander has talked about this, going back to the ball and how the seams are lower. He claims he can't get the same grip on his slider. Well, I feel sorry for him. But,
right. Kate Upton will cheer him up.
Yeah, that's right. Those pitchers who rely on off-speed pitches and sliders are complaining the ball is different and it affects how they pitch. Is that just a psychological thing on their part, or is it really something facile that you can say, yes, that actually does affect the home run?
Well, it definitely does. And it's physics. The laces allow the pitcher to grab the – so when you throw a slider, for example, you're really throwing your slider with your middle finger.
Yes.
And that middle finger needs to be right up against the seam in order to get the leverage to get the snap.
Right.
Well, if that seam is lower – well, you're just not going to get the same leverage. The other part to it is when you have laces on a baseball that are sticking up, as you throw that with a good grip and you get the seam, there's an aerodynamic factor as it's spinning through the air, and it's going to catch more wind. As it catches more wind on those big seams, it's going to create a sharper dart, to the out go to the way a slider goes, righty or lefty.
Right.
So. That I think is a huge difference. It also goes back to these guys can't throw the same nasty sinkers they used to throw.
That's right.
And the knuckleballers can't grip the laces the same way they used to. So there's a lot of factors in the pitching. Now, one thing, though, it is more aerodynamic, the ball is.
Right.
So I think that's another factor why a guy who used to throw, let's say 92, is throwing 95. Like 92 in college, 95. Well, college has now gone to the low seam ball. But a few years, this is just a 2-year-old thing. They had the big seams in college, So Verlander grew up throwing high seam balls, learned how to pitch throwing high seam balls. Right. I'm not sure if he signed out of high school or college. I'm not aware. I don't know his background.
I don't remember.
But anyway, most likely he got to even pro ball where the seams are still a little bit higher than they are now.
Right.
So to his point, yeah, I mean it's not as easy to throw the nastiness like you used to.
Yeah, well, it's not as easy, but he still got results. So
Right.
I mean, as I said, I feel so sorry for him and all the other pitchers. I think the slider should have been outlawed when I played. But
Right.
now I see it's a good tool to have.
Right.
But let's talk about closers and relievers for a minute. The Dodgers, of course, have Kenley Jansen. There are a few elite closers around the league. But starting pitchers are only going 6 innings sometimes now. And most teams need a bridge to that closer, to the 9th inning. If you don't have that, you're not going to go far in the postseason. Dodgers had Morrow last season. He's gone. But starting pitchers only going 6 innings, 7 innings, having a pitch count of 90 or 100 pitches. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's kind of a newer thing. When my dad played, for example, in the 60s and 70s, it was very uncommon for the pitcher to go less than 6 innings.
Yes.
And there wasn't very many innings thrown by what we now call middle relievers, because and they didn't even have closers. It was closed by committee.
Right.
And whoever was good to go that day, that was usually So thinking about the dynamic of, as a batter, if you face a pitcher 3 times, you're going to have a way better chance that third time than you did the first time. First of all, he's tired. Second of all, you've seen him 3 times.
Right.
Well, now you're seeing the batter, the starting pitcher maybe twice. Then they bring in a middle relief guy who's you're handed. So they'll bring in a guy who's righty to me because I'm righty, or a lefty for you because you're lefty. And now you got that nightmare at bat right there. And then the next time you come up, there's either the setup guy in the 7th and 8th who's nasty,
right,
and then the closer in the 9th. So hitting the way the pitching has been set up now, I think it's as much more difficult as a hitter to be successful. Yet
right,
we're still seeing guys doing it. That's why I'm just so much more impressed with these young guys and their consistency,
right,
against these nasty pitchers who, we would have a guy or two in our league that threw 100.
Right.
Seems like every damn guy coming out of some certain bullpens is throwing 98 to 102.
That's right.
That's
right. More and more of them, too. Okay, well, just about to run out of time here, Jim. I want to thank you again for joining me tonight. To all you listeners, we'll be back again after the season opens. And remember to email, or if you have my number, text me your questions for Doc's Clubhouse Trivia Question. And we will be back soon. Thank you all for listening, and enjoy your week.